Welcome to the Forever Milk Podcast. We're just here to talk about some albums, have a good time, talk about some good tunes. Today we have taken a listen to That's the Spirit by Bring Me the Horizon. Um, this album came out in 2015, September 11th. It was kind of a shift in tone for this band and kind of a new direction for them, and it was pretty divisive amongst the fans when it came out, if I'm remembering correctly. And say I've been very intimately familiar with this album since it came out. I think this is Tim's first time listening to it, at least a few times. So
I listened to it twice in the past week, and I kind of crammed the second time in today.
yeah,
So
I sat down and listened to it. I probably listened to it 3 or 4 times this week, but I sat down and listened to it again this morning just to make sure it was fresh.
Yep.
And so um,
I think this album sounds like a. It sounds like it could have been like a 2000s version of like Seattle 90s rock.
I
Like
think
it's
that's
not grungy, but it's like it has the kind of darkness and intensity of Seattle music from the 90s.
yeah, I think that's a pretty fair thing to say. I think that there's a lot going on in this album, while it also is fairly consistent. Um, there's not ever really been anything that is quite like it and hasn't been since, especially since this band has shifted away from the sound that they kind of established on this record as well. Um, so I'm kind of interested in to dig into it. We haven't really talked too much about what each of us think about this album, at least in depth. So this is kind of going in fresh. That's kind of how we intend to do this going forward. So yeah, we can go ahead and start um, with the first track, Doomed.
Yeah, before anything, I'll say I really like this album's cover.
Oh, dude, the album art
Um,
super iconic, super
Very
sick.
simple, minimalistic, and you don't really need. It just goes to show you don't really need. If a design is good enough and it fits well enough, it can be something really simple and work really well for the album. Um, and I think somehow with that simple image, they did something that kind of perfectly encapsulated this whole thing. So it's really good, and I think it's partly, maybe subconsciously, partly the reason why I thought it was like a good Seattle album because it's like rainy.
Rainy.
Yeah,
That's cool.
rain
Actually,
in Seattle.
just off a quick aside before we get really into this, um, if you ever get interested in hearing some more stuff, I know I've shown you um, a video or two of it before, and I recommend anybody else go check it out. They did a concert while they were touring this album um, at Royal Albert Hall, which was primarily a uh, concert hall for orchestral stuff. And I'm sure they've done other shows too, but I think the first time they ever really did a big rock concert was with Bring Me the Horizon. And they brought in a full orchestra and kind of wrote a bunch of orchestral pieces to go with the songs. And so it is one of the most interesting, like, I guess, translations from album version to live version that I've heard, and I think
Yeah,
it's a really cool and adds a lot of atmosphere. The whole video, the whole performance should be up on YouTube. Timmy, if you want to check it out at some time, there's some really
yeah.
cool stuff. I know you.
Bill Burr did his last comedy special at Royal Albert Hall,
Uh,
and it was really good. And the Killers did a concert DVD there as well at some
oh, really?
point. But
I guess they've
yeah,
started. Or maybe I'm just out of touch with what goes on at Royal Albert Hall. But
Mhm.
yeah, we can go ahead and dive into it.
Yeah. So I've got this song in my head right now and listen to it so I could remember how it went. Um, I mean, right away you get into like very pop sounding. It, we were talking before. It's like a metal slash hardcore, or sorry, metal slash post hardcore band playing just straight up pop songs, and you can hear it right off the bat, I think. And like with the falsetto stuff and it's typically very simple song structure and very like tasteful melodies, although it's very dark.
Mhm.
Um, and but I think it works well enough, um, because I mean it's still very heavy, and it's got even if you're like a metal purist or post hardcore purist, it's got plenty of screaming and the heaviness in the melody, and so I don't know, like
For me, this track is, in my opinion, one of the best examples of, at least in rock music, um, dynamics as far as loud and quiet. While at least the mix itself sits pretty, I would say, even throughout the whole thing, it definitely, the way that the instrumentation expands into this huge full sound from this really kind of, you know, tense, very like tight verse section. Um, and this is also, I believe, if I'm correct, this is the first time they really let, uh, Oliver Sykes had started taking voice lessons, and started using better uh, techniques for himself during time between albums. Because previously on their last stuff, it was mostly screaming, and he was using very bad technique, and he was wearing his voice out. And so this is where he started learning how to sing. And for this to be kind of what they open up with, to really show off what kind of a range he actually had, it was very interesting. And this is the
yeah,
first time that they had let their keyboard player start really like hammering in on some vocals too. He does most of the backing vocals on this record. His name's Jordan Fish. Um,
yeah, it's very
Phenomenal.
like traditional '80s sounding synth a lot of times,
There is a
you
lot
know.
of sort of 80s-ish synth on this record, which I'm sure plays into kind of why I like it so much, because I've always felt with a lot of 80s music, some of the best is when it's got a darker, more moody sound to the synths. Um,
But it's not like the way this song and a lot of songs go is that it's like um it's not like a guitar based like rock thing necessarily. It's like the guitars are kind of everything is like a blend in the whole mix and arrangement, and so the guitars just contribute to that because you can
mhm.
hear like the synth really clearly in the chorus. And so but
Yeah,
yeah, I think it works and it allows for that. It contributes to a different sort of heaviness that's different than just straight up,
it
drop tuning and crank the shit up all the
yeah,
way,
it has this really, it goes from this really like, you know, it's very I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for is, but it transitions from that very like tight constrained section in the verses into this very heavy, almost oppressive feeling in the chorus when everything comes in, and it's very like overbearing, and it really adds to the emotion and the tone. And that's one thing about this track, I think, is atmosphere. Um, is some of the best. And I think personally, this is an example of best example of Bring Me the Horizon's musicianship. Some of the best songwriting they've ever come up with. So,
Yeah.
um,
I, I kind of like how they reference sort of maybe it wasn't intentional, but like they reference like the album cover um right off the bat like in their lyrics.
mhm.
But yeah, that's a really good chorus in this song. I really like that. Um and I really like the screaming and the falsetto in the chorus. And so
Oh yeah.
they definitely came out really strong with that.
A lot of that falsetto would be attributed to Jordan Fish, who is the backing vocalist and keyboard player. So he has a great voice. Surprisingly
Mhm.
similar sounding to Ollie, but in a lot more of a kind of a soft and very more pristine type. He's got more of a pop voice, and Ollie's got more of a metal voice. But um,
Mhm.
yeah, this to me
Oliver
is
kind of looks like he's wearing a wig.
he always kind of looks like he's wearing a wig.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, for me this is definitely one of the highest points on the album. One of my favorite album openers ever. I think it just sets the tone so perfectly. And I would probably, this will be not the most common thing, but I'm going to give this song a 10.
Well,
Hmm.
I'll give it like a 6.
Yeah, I figured that would be the case. I like I said,
Yeah.
this is I think this is a lot more in my vein of taste than yours, but that's why I was kind of
Yeah.
excited to do this one, kind of see like the back and forth and the difference in opinions.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't like the mix as much. Like maybe it was just the particular videos I was listening to, but I feel like it could have been louder and more dynamic. Like, that's a big problem I have with a lot of rock stuff is if it's like not loud enough.
Mhm.
Partly because like
That's interesting. It
my
might have. I think it might have been the videos that you were listening to, because I have this downloaded to my phone, and I've also listened to it off Spotify or whatever. But I've always felt that this album is like one of the most cleanly mixed albums I've ever heard, and like
yeah
the dynamic range in the sound on this song in particular has always blown me away. Um,
yeah.
so
Maybe it's like my frame of reference for like really well mixed loud rock stuff. One of my main frames of reference is Wasting Light,
mm,
which is like one of the most like abrasive
yeah,
sounding albums, it's like fucking, scissors in your ears almost, but it's awesome. It sounds so good and so like, you know, clean at the same time. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense, but um it this is like much warmer sounding of an
hmm,
album, I think is the thing.
that's fair.
Maybe
I think that's yeah. I would say it depends on the track, but overall, I would say it's definitely a lot warmer than Wasting
mhm.
Light.
Yeah. Let's head on to the next track. I kind of like this one. I was like I like the cheerleading
Oh, it's fun.
stuff.
It's a really
Yeah.
fun and very like cynical take on, just kind of not thinking about stuff. But yeah, so
Yeah.
track number 2, Happy Song. You can go ahead since you've already got something to
Uh
say.
yeah. I really like this one cuz it's not like the other ones. Um it has a nasty fucking riff in it in the pre-chorus, and so um and yeah, like it I love the kind of irony that the song has. It's happy song, but it's like, really dark and heavy.
Hmm.
I feel like they kind of um there's some like untapped potential in like the vocal melodies, because there's dynamics when you get to the uh what part is it? It's like sing if you sing along um like if he did that kind of melody that once or twice, but I feel like he could have gone a little bit higher in that part. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? But he did do some screaming towards the end, so that's a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, I overall I think this is really well written. It's got dynamics, it's got a riff, and it's got cheerleading. So you know,
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say about this one other than I think it's one of just like this is one of those songs that it immediately gets you pumped up. It's got that type
hmm
of energy to it. The cheerleader adds kind of a fun, goofy like feel to it behind all of the oppressiveness that is present on this album. And again, the riff is nasty, and that drop into the chorus pretty much every time it hits always feels really nice. Um, and it just makes you want to break stuff. And I'm not somebody that gets
yeah,
like in a mood to break stuff, but this is one of those songs for me. Um, and I love the way that and this kind of pops up more and more throughout the album, but how they'll have sort of some gang vocals here and there, and I think they fit really well on this track. Um, so yeah, personally,
yeah.
this song kind of just sits around. I would say about 8, 9. I'd say a 9 for me personally.
I'll give it like an 8. Um, and one more thing, I really like it sounds like when you hear the cheerleading with a heavy song like this, it
Hmm.
sounds like it's making fun of like hope. But if you actually listen to the lyrics, it's like a really hopeful song.
Yeah, it's definitely a
Um,
lot more like encouraging than a lot of the other tracks on this album. So
yeah, but it sounds like I guess it's just their way of saying like this is how we do a happy song.
yeah.
Take it or leave it. This is we're fucking bring me the horizon, dude.
Hmm.
So I don't know, but it definitely sounds like if you first listen, it sounds like it's making fun of like let's be happy and let's be positive and that kind of stuff.
I
Um,
think I think at the same time it is still doing that a little bit, but I think it's also kind of calling attention to how like valuable um, a song like that can be for someone who needs something to distract them from something um,
Yeah,
that's not necessarily going right for them. So I like this song a lot. But I am going to change
yeah,
it a little bit. I'm going to go back down to an 8. Um,
yeah,
kind of not sure where I sit on that. I'll say 8.5. 8.5. I'm not.
yeah.
So
Next song
moving
is
on to
Throne.
song number 3, Throne.
I have all the lyrics pulled up on like different links for every song.
Hmm.
So I could fucking remember, like, refresh my memory a little bit. But so yeah, you go first.
So this song for me, and I know this is one of the singles. I think that it is
Well, they
one
had
of
like 7 singles for this album.
yeah, and I think for good reason. I think there's a lot of tracks here that really stick out amongst
Yeah.
the rest.
That's a very pop artist thing to do, actually.
Mhm.
Have like half your album put out as singles. Although that could be like me, just maybe a lot of people do that in rock. But yeah, they had a lot of singles. Well over half the album was singles.
Yeah. So this song for me is definitely I enjoy this song quite a bit. Um, and it's kind of just one of those like you can throw whatever crap at you want at me. I'm just gonna stand my ground and do what I have to. You can't really knock me off my pedestal. Um,
Hmm.
but I don't, this one is kind
You,
of one of those that
you
just
say
kind
it
of
like
sits.
you say it like on my pedestal, like as if to say like you can't deflate my ego or something.
Yeah, maybe that
Although I
wasn't the
know
right
that's not
way
how
to
you meant it.
word it, but
Yeah, I know that's not how you meant it, but that just sounded funny to me. I'm never gonna. But anyways,
Um, I feel like this track for me is sort of not one of the strongest on the album. I enjoy a lot of what it brings to the table. I think the emotions there. I think that the sound is there, and I think it hits really hard when it needs to. Um, but I've never been a huge fan of electronic vocal manipulation, especially when even if it is done for the sake, it's very overtly done. It's not like they're trying to hide an auto tune or something. But the kind of like section in the chorus when they match the uh, the uh, the vocals electronically to the synth line, it kind of I like it, but it definitely doesn't really grip me the way a lot of other stuff on this album would. Um, so for me, it kind of takes it down a little bit. I think it's unnecessary. I think that it works really well for I'm sure live shows, and it does kind of give it sort of an anthemic feel. Uh,
hmm.
but I've personally never really resonated super heavily with anything that gets particularly anthemic. So as a result, this song kind of falls a little bit more flat than the rest of them. Not to say that I don't think it's very good, because I do think this is a very good track.
Yeah, I think I'd give it like a 6. Um, but as far as like that stuff goes, like the electronic elements, I think it's not something I would do, and not something like I would always choose to listen to. But I think they managed to do it really well.
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree.
Um, like they crafted a sound that didn't sound like it was very poppy, but they didn't. They did it in a way that it didn't sound contrived,
Hmm.
um, or like shoehorned in there, because they just managed to
Hmm.
match the intensity of their sound and the darkness of it, with that sort of. Um, they got in like an approximation of that, and so I think it's like, again, it's not my cup of tea, but I won't complain too much about it.
Yeah,
Overall, I give the song a 6. It's a
yeah.
pretty strong, decent song.
It's pretty
It's
much at a
solid.
7 for me. I still will seek it out from time to time. I enjoy listening to it. I get pretty into it, but it's not definitely one of the highlights of the record for me. So I'd say a
Yeah,
7.
yeah, but I always enjoy like this more heavy vocals, the screaming and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, so I really like that. Like it's a strong chorus. That
Hmm.
seems to be something they never really get wrong.
Yeah, they definitely, and it's definitely interesting because even Sempiternal is not the heaviest album ever, but even if you go back to Sempiternal, which is the album preceding this one, where they started to implement a little bit more melody and a little bit more sort of poppiness to their sound, which somebody's probably gonna lynch me for saying that, but um, there's
I'm going to
a
lynch
sense
you,
in the
Tyler Rowe.
choruses that always have this hook, even though it's mostly still screaming on the previous album. So they've always had a really good knack for that. But we can move on to the next track, True
Yeah.
Friends.
Yeah, that's fucking intense, man.
This song,
The
yeah,
lyrics in this
it's
song.
angry. And
Yeah, it's like somebody who's been like truly wronged. Um, I don't know what happened to him, but like what somebody had to do to like evoke or provoke feelings like this. Um, but yeah, it's never some you do hear people say like you like friends will stab you in the back, but
mhm.
this is a take I've never heard. It's kind of a hot take, I guess.
Yeah. So for me, I actually really enjoy how, you know, relentless the lyricism is on this track. It definitely it feels like very genuine anger, which I think
Yeah.
is
I am truly angry,
I don't
sir.
know.
Let me make it clear.
And I've always really appreciated when something feels super genuine. And for me, what really sells this track home is the way that the strings come in over top of the guitar parts, especially when it drops in. And I think they play off of each other really, really well. And it adds this level of heightened intensity to the track that I think wouldn't have been there had it just been the guitar riff. So
Yeah. So what do you think you give this one?
this one, this one is
Yeah.
easily, and let me look, let me compare. This one's easily an 8 for me.
Mm. Yeah, I think I'd probably give it like a 7.
All right.
It's one of the more solid tracks, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
All right, moving on to the next track, Follow You. This one's a bit different,
I
especially
like this.
in the overall flow of the album. This is the first one where it kind of breaks down into something a little slower. For me, this is easily one of my favorite tracks on the album. I think that it's got a really interesting flow. It's a lot less angry. It's got a much more, sentimental feel to it. The chorus is still super strong, and I love the guitar work throughout this track. It's super like
Yeah,
clean, really tasty, fits the atmosphere really well.
yeah, I really like this one. Again, like really solid chorus, and I dig the falsettos. Like if you're gonna go like poppy like
Hmm.
this, you have to be able to do it well, and they really did. Like I'm not typically a fan of like um, octave harmonies,
Hmm.
vocal harmonies. Uh, but I mean, I've heard a lot more of it lately because of stuff you've shown me, so I sort of get used to it. But like, um, I think it really works. Like again, when you can sing as well as he can.
Yeah, I think a lot of
So
it contributes to how much is going on in a mix, whether octave harmonies feel like they fit or not. Because if there's already a lot happening, they serve really well to just kind of fill out the space. Um,
mhm,
and I think it does it very well on this track as well.
yeah,
And that's something for something that's so poppy on a really heavy, you know, very pop influence but still heavy album. I feel like everything feels so full. Like there's not a lot of just like, it feels like there might be some extra space floating around. Everything seems to kind of come together into one big piece. So I really appreciate that.
yeah. And I kind of dig the lyrics too. I mean, it's a little bit like who Death Cab for Cutie wrote a similar kind of song
I will
lyrically. Have you
follow
heard that
you
one?
into the dark.
Yeah,
Yes, that's
it was
the
super
big hit.
mellow. Yeah. So that it's kind of the same thing, like sort of parasitic, codependent
Hmm.
type of relationship. That is just what it sounds like, at least. Parasitic is kind of a strong word, but
It
that,
depends
that's
on how you interpret stuff. Like I said, music, I prefer to think about music and lyrics in particular in a much more like subjective space than a lot of people do. A lot of people like to sit down and really look into what the artist particularly meant. I know you're kind of like that sometimes, but for me, it's always interesting to try to find a way to relate the lyrics to myself personally. Um,
yeah.
and there's definitely things I could relate this to. So I don't know. Um, if I had to give this one a ranking, this one would sit very much at a 9 for me personally.
Yeah. I'll give it like an 8. I think it's pretty rad song.
And now we move on to What You Need. What You Need.
Oh, this one was like just fell flat for me.
This one for
Like
me
totally.
is definitely the weakest track on the album. That's not to say
I
there
was
isn't things I don't like. There isn't things I like about it and don't like about it. I think that the chorus is kind of bland. Goes really heavy and really fast, but it doesn't really beg that to happen, especially considering the verses, because the verses have a really sick like bass groove going on and still have kind of a cool driving energy to them, but the way it transitions into the chorus is a little jarring for me.
mhm.
I like the guitar solo in here. I like the kind of intensity that's present, but I feel like I don't know. There's not a whole lot of feel present in there, and it's just like I'm gonna rip out a quick little guitar solo to make it feel really intense. And
Yeah.
I like it, but it definitely is not a highlight. Um, and so I don't have a whole lot to say about this one besides that point. Like the bass groove and the I love the verses. I think pretty much everything else about this song is pretty meh.
Yeah. I was like wondering. I knew like that this album had a lot of singles, and I was like wondering about this one as I was listening to it. I was like, I bet this wasn't a single. This was one of the few
It
that
was
didn't
not.
make
This
it,
was
and
just
sure
like a
enough,
deep
it
cut.
wasn't. Yeah. Um. And so yeah, the lyrics are like, one of the things that just completely they were not enticing to me at all. Like, because it's sort of about you know like you don't want to hear this or you don't want to do this, but like you should do it anyway. It's like, well, it just reminds you of being in that situation. That's like,
Hmm.
I don't want to hear what I don't want to hear. Like that's just how it made me feel. Like,
It is very accusatory.
and so yeah, I didn't feel like I was in the place of like I felt like it made me think first of being in the situation of hearing that rather than being someone who would tell that to someone. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
I'm not typically in that sort of position. I guess there's not a whole lot of reason for me to be, but um, so that was one thing that kind of killed it for me. And again, but it wasn't a particularly exciting song. This is the one that starts out with like the kind of the two notes on the guitar just back and forth. Is this the one,
I think so.
or is that the next one?
It's definitely not the next one. It's probably this one. I mean,
Okay.
let me just make sure that I'm not crazy. See, this is why we need to take notes. Yeah, it is. It is the two notes on the guitar. Yeah. So
Thought you needed.
I do. I
Can you
just
still
wanted
hear
to
me?
double check myself. Yeah, I can still hear you. Your video froze for a second, but
Okay. I think you went out for like a few seconds.
yeah, something's happening. Your video's kind of delayed.
Yours is like yours was frozen for like several seconds. But
Yours did that too, but I think you've caught up. Say something real quick.
la, 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 la.
Yeah, it's all caught up. Cool. So
Yeah.
moving
I think
on.
I'll
Oh yeah,
give
we
this
didn't give a
song like
rating.
yeah. We I'll probably give this song like a 4, honestly.
It's a 6 for me. I don't
Which coming from me is kind of a harsh rating,
Yeah. It's a 6 for me. I don't actively dislike this song. Yeah, for me to dislike, so the way I rate stuff is if I like it a little, it'll be 6, and the more I like it, it'll go up. If I actively dislike it, it'll be like a start at 4 and
The
go
more
down.
below 5 it'll go,
Yeah.
yeah.
5 is if I'm completely neutral and have no feelings towards a song whatsoever. So,
What song would you give a 1? Of any song?
well, I don't want to say, somebody's gonna get mad at me. I'm sure if someone watches this
Do
and
it.
likes it. Fever by the Black Keys is the first song off the top of my head that would be an immediate 1.
I don't know that one.
It's one of my least favorite songs I've ever heard. I cannot stand it. It's horrible synth
Wow.
tone, crappy chorus, bad use of gang vocals, uninteresting drum track, bad like boring bass track, practically nothing worth happening on guitar, bad vocals. Do not like that song.
Yeah.
Somebody listening to this, if I don't cut that out, is gonna be like, "It's one of my favorite songs. I don't want to."
No, we should keep that.
No, I do not
Uh,
like that track. Anyways,
yeah,
completely
that's about
off
it for
topic.
this. Yes.
I don't have much to say about What You Need. Yeah, 6 for me. I still like it enough to listen to it if it comes on, but I'm definitely not gonna ever look for it. So
Ooh, we got Avalanche.
next up, Avalanche. This song hits me right, very much so.
This song has a big dick.
It's it does. It very
It
much
has a-
does. There's a lot of really cool different parts that happen. Like a lot of stuff going on in this song that I really really like. I think that the use of the synth, like the synth tones that they've chosen for this track, are gorgeous. Um, it has this really really like almost like sweeping melody over the chorus, really high intensity, very like desperate sounding almost. I
Mhm.
love the melodies in the verses and the pre-chorus, especially the pre-chorus might be one of my favorite parts about this track. I love the kind of like 80s synth tone that starts to come up, and again, it's still got that really dark feel to it. And even more so, I also incredibly love the post-chorus, which they use, right at the bridge, and then they'll do it like at the outro. But I think that there's a sense of cohesion that kind of really fits during that section. Everything seems to be working really well together, and it's got sort of that like really easy, really memorable um, flow to it. You know how when you're nodding your head to a song, it's like that part comes in, and you're like, all right, this is the groove for the track. I don't know. I really
Yeah.
like it. I think that everything about this track is pretty much spot on for me personally.
Yeah. I think again, they just can't stop writing like banging choruses. They except for like maybe the last track.
Yeah.
But like still like everything on the album is like well done. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? They obviously know how to craft a really good song and arrange and that like everything technical about everything on the album is good. But like again, this is like just another example. They don't know how to do any chorus that isn't like really good. And
Yeah.
so and the lyrics are very like general,
Mhm.
much more like widely applicable than all the other stuff on the album, I think. Um, you know, if if you really liked this song, maybe you'd consider it like one of like the quintessential songs of the album.
Mhm.
Probably more of other tracks like than this one, but uh yeah, I mean, I think it kind of encapsulates the whole of the feel of the album and
That's fair. That's
um
very fair.
so I mean I'd give this one probably like a 7.
For me, this is probably I would put this one at a 9 personally. I think
Have I
there's
given anything a 9? Did I give Happy Song a 9?
you gave Happy Song an 8. I'm pretty sure,
That's what I
and
thought.
I gave Happy Song an 8.5. But yeah, no, for me personally, this is definitely like one of the high points. I think that everything in this song, there's so many different little aspects of it that seem to really click. So I really
Mhm.
like it. So 9 from me. Um,
Yeah.
moving on, we have Run. For me, this is the other track on the album that's not super standout. I like it well enough. I think the synth choice is really nice, but at the same time, there's not a whole lot in this track that really draws me to it. I enjoy like the kind of desperation that kind of comes out in the chorus. There's like a sense of pleading, um, and like a real urgency to get away from the the thing that he wants to get away from. But I really really appreciate that this is, as far as the deep cut goes, I think it fits really well on the album, especially more so than What You Need. But um, it's definitely not one that I'm gonna like go out of my way to listen to.
Yeah, this was like one of the least memorable ones in my opinion. Like I can't even really remember how it goes. Um,
I
but
think I will say in the final chorus when it kind of breaks down and switches it up a little bit to give the synth and the guitar a little bit more focus than it did previously in the song. I think that's when the song kind of clicks for me. It just is a shame that it takes so long to get to that point. Um,
yeah,
but I do like it. I don't dislike it. It's also going to sit at a 6 for me, around the same place as what you need, slightly above if I had to order them.
yeah. I'll give it like a 5 or a 6.
Fair enough.
Since I can hardly remember any of it. I will definitely be taking notes next
Yeah.
time on any new stuff.
All right.
Because
And
this
now
is kind of embarrassing.
moving on to the big boy of this album,
Yeah,
Drown. What a song. What a
this
song this is.
song, right off the bat, I can tell you it's a 9 for me. Like, yeah, it's like probably lyrically, it's like a high point. One of the high points of the album. Um, Actually, this is like probably more of closer to what a quintessential song would be. Um,
I would say that it is like pretty much the quintessential song off this album. I would say it would either be this or Doomed. Um, if I had to pick the ones that I'd be like,
mhm,
this is what this album is good. Like this is why this album is good. It's going to be one of those tracks.
mhm.
But
I would say this one or
Happy Song, I'd say would be a fair choice as
this
well.
one or Happy Song or the last or Oh No.
Oh no, hey, we'll get to Oh No.
Yeah,
I have a lot to say about Oh
yeah.
No.
Um, yeah, I don't really have anything bad to say about this one. Like, it's just solid all the way through.
Mhm.
Everything about it. The
I
the the vocals are like, when you hear the very last like talking about or the very last line of the song when it gets silent and it's just his voice, it's like, did he sound like that the whole song? Like you can't even tell because it's layered so thickly. Um, but it's a very interesting method of like it's a very interesting delivery, vocal delivery.
Mhm.
And so I mean it works like when it is layered that well, but I sort of had mixed feelings about it. Like it sounded really good, but it also was like, is that sustainable at all? Like to sing like that?
So the thing with the ending of the song for me is it always felt like that was a take where, at least to me, it sounds very, very raw emotionally. And I imagine that's probably the reason that they had it sound like that. Because, sometimes when people are getting very emotional when performing or recording a track, their voices can, falter a bit if they're having a hard time keeping it together. And I imagine that's kind of what was happening in the studio. At least that's what it gives me when I listen to that.
Yeah,
Because this feels like sonically, I think this song is very different than a lot of this album. It's a lot warmer, and I think it's a lot brighter.
it's a little
Um,
more mellow. Yeah,
yeah, and it still has that kind of sense of desperation that I think is, shown up
yeah.
here and there on
It's got
previous
the
tracks.
intensity.
The strings on this track really help fill out the space. I think that the choir and the gang vocals work pretty well. Um, and of course, it's just got maybe the strongest hook on the album. Um,
Yeah,
but definitely, I think like an emotional centerpiece. If I had to pick one for the album, it feels like everything kind of comes to like a spearhead here. Comes to
yeah,
a point where this is the catharsis, the emotional catharsis. This is the peak, um,
yeah.
and everything from this point is kind of like mellow back
It's
out.
interesting. It's interesting. The lyrics have a lot of like questions,
Hmm.
and they're not rhetorical questions either. Like very sincere and honest questions. Like, how the fuck am I gonna get through this? Basically, is what the song is. But like a legitimate concern and uncertainty of like what's gonna happen here and how are things gonna get better. So I think that's an interesting thing that I noticed on this one
Yeah,
5 seconds ago as I was looking at the lyrics.
yeah, for sure, man. This is the song that got me into this band, so I have a lot of a big soft spot. I kind of I know I'm kind of not like the classic Bring Me the Horizon fan. I don't like all their heavier stuff quite as much as I like this album, but
Hmm.
the release of this single is what got me into them. So a lot of people are gonna immediately, when I say that, they're gonna dismiss my opinion because
Oh, yeah, it was the
this
first
is
single.
this is a pretty, like I said, this album was very divisive for people, and it kind of split the fan base a good bit. If I remember correctly, I don't think a lot of people hated this album. I think that it's one of those albums that's a little too well put together to really be considered like, oh, this is one of those bands kind of like, going under. Um, but no, for me, this track is easily a 9, and
Yeah, I agree.
I will actively go out of my way to put this track on, especially if I'm showing somebody this group who's never heard it before. So
Yeah. Blasphemy.
Blasphemy, I love this track. I think that it's one or two. It's not the one that gripped me the first time I listened to it. Um, you know, it was probably my second or third listen. Every now and then there's a track that does grow on me quite a bit, and this is one of the ones that has. This song it feels, I guess the pop feel on this one's pretty high. Um, and I really like the lyrics on this one. At least I feel like the way I've interpreted them, it's just calling someone out for hypocrisy. Um,
Yeah.
and there was a certain point in my life when I was dealing with somebody who was very, very hypocritical about a lot of stuff, and this one kind of just hit home. Um, but yeah, I just think that it's super catchy. I think that it's got a really nice flow. Um, I think it's got a fun energy. It's not super, super aggressive, but it's not like too soft to where you can't like get into it and rock out a bit. I love the guitar work on this track. The solo is, um, probably one of my favorite solos. I wouldn't put it in my top 10 or anything, but I think it really shows off that the guitar player for Bring Me the Horizon, Lee Malia, is got a lot more that he could do outside of just playing some nasty riffs.
Hmm.
It shows out that he's got a really good sense of feel too, and I would like to hear more stuff in that vein from him. So I feel like it was a little short, but I do really, really enjoy this track.
Yeah. Yeah. I This wasn't one of my favorites, but I think it was really well done. So I give it like a 7. Um, because 6 just feels too like
Dismissive.
mediocre of a rating. Like, yeah, yeah, like um, this isn't something like lyrically that I felt like immediately made me think of like anything directly that I've experienced. It didn't grab me right away. Like if I thought about it, like I could think of stuff like, but um, you know, like just immediately it
Hmm.
didn't have the sort of effect on me. But like it definitely, you could surmise that it's like about like somebody religious.
Hmm.
Um, I would assume. I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, I think that if I'm remembering correctly, Ollie Sykes is very, very much outspoken against religious fanaticism, and I think he's pretty heavily either
Yeah.
atheist or agnostic. So,
He seems like a lot of the lyrics make him seem really religious, not just on this album, but on like the only like one other song from them
hmm.
that I know. So he seemed like a religious guy, but he's also like not a fan of like dogma and fanaticism, as
Hmm.
you say, you know. So
Well,
that's kind of the sense I got.
then again, on the next album, he writes a song about starting a cult, but it's more like a
Yeah,
tongue-in-cheek kind of thing. He's kind of making fun
right.
of it. Um, but that's. I don't know if I'll have us listen to that album. I don't like it very much. I know it
Yeah,
was even more divisive than this album, and that's like a whole conversation for another video or another thing if we ever get around to that one. But
yeah,
um,
yeah. But I don't know anything about the guy, but it sounds to me like, and I think I may have heard before, maybe incorrectly, that he was religious, like or Christian in some way, or people
um,
might have thought Bring Me the Horizon was like a vaguely Christian band, even though I hate to use that term.
mhm.
Um,
No, they're
and I
very
hate to
much
label
not.
people that way.
They're very much not religious as a group. I don't think they've got a lot
Mhm.
of stuff that they've talked about, I'm sure. I remember interviews where Ollie's, at least I think I remember an interview where Ollie's talked about it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they grew up in Christian households. You know, that tends to happen a lot with
Yeah,
these kinds of groups. Um, but yeah, no, for me, this song's like a solid 8. Really like it.
yeah,
Listen to it a lot, but definitely not one of the best on the album. So, and now we get
yeah,
to our album closer, Oh No, which I think might be the most divisive track on this album for the fan base as a whole. Or maybe not even necessarily so. I think that this, if I'm remembering correctly, I feel like this track got pretty negative reaction just because of how full on into the pop that this one went.
yeah.
But for
I
me
think it's
personally, I think this is probably my favorite song on the album.
I think it's one of my favorites. Like it was popular because it has the like syncopated drum beat in the beginning and like but I've noticed like some bands like do a song as a closer that's a little bit more mellow but a little bit more emotional as closers, you know. Um like a little bit more softer and sincere, like it's not like I don't want to say like hiding behind because I don't think like heaviness and noise is like an inaccurate representation of like emotions, but it's like it's less
It's a lot more intimate, and it's kind of
yeah,
it feels
yeah.
a little more open for me personally. A lot of the times, this I wouldn't say is like one of the most intimate, tracks that to be used as an album closer. And as much as I absolutely adore this track, I don't know if I would have chosen it to close this album particularly. I think I would have personally put Drown as the closer.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think I thought that at some point.
But no, I mean, easily for me, this is a 10 right off the bat. This is one of my favorite songs I've ever listened to. I have a huge soft spot for stuff that has, like I said, dark 80s kind of synthy vibes, and this album really has that feel to it, especially the synth tone that they've used is hella 80s, like super 80s. And it's just got that really moody kind of dark, kind of some sort of eerie atmosphere, but it's still very warm. And I absolutely love the inclusion of the saxophone at the very end of this track.
Oh yeah, it does have saxophone in it. That's pretty rad.
I think sax is super, super underused in rock music, and I've only seen 3 or 4 groups do it, and I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And especially how muted it comes in, and it slowly kind of breaks out into the last chorus, and it's I love this track easily.
I don't think it always works, but they did it really well in this instance. Like the sax, I think. And this one is like it's a little bit harder to wrap my head around. I still need to listen to it some more, but I definitely could tell like I really dug this one. And I think it does work as a closer. So yeah, I'll give it. I'm not sure if I said already. I'll give this one an 8.
Cool. I don't think anything made it to 9 on this album for you. That's interesting, but cool.
Maybe on a good day, and if I listened to stuff more, it would be a 9. Like, but overall, like, I'll give this album 7 because it's so well done, but not maybe not something I would always go out of my way to listen to. I'll probably listen to it more. Yeah, I don't know. Overall, right now, a 7. If I'm being even a little bit generous, like, and as I've gone through, like, I've kind of realized, how much I do like a lot of the stuff. But that'll be sufficient for now. 6 or 7.
Yeah. This is one of those albums for me that I've liked it since I heard it. Like the minute I heard the first single, I was like, I'm gonna like this album. And then as the singles kept coming out, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And and I loved this album for a long time. I never would have considered it my favorites, but as time has progressed, I've loved it more and more and more, and it just keeps it's one of those that's
jerking
never really like sure. We can say that the album is jerking me off. But I'm feeling this album up.
You didn't see that coming, did you?
I don't think I did. But no, for sure. easily one of my favorite albums of all time. This is not going to be a common ranking, but I personally would put this album at a 10 for me.
Wow.
I think it just checks all the boxes. I think it that I would want out of like a full, complete musical experience.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not always like the most, like the tone and the emotion I don't always necessarily relate to all the time, but I can't get over like the way that the album is layered, the musicianship that's present, the care that was put into the mix, and the way things sit. I just can't get over, and I love it to death. So for me
Yeah.
personally, it's a 10, and I don't think I have a whole lot else to say about this one, honestly.
Yeah. I range from a 4 to 8 on this album. You went from 10 to like
Six
I
was
don't
the
even know,
lowest thing I
6.
gave on this album. So,
Yep.
alrighty. Well, thank you guys for checking us out. Make sure you drink your milk, make your bones strong. Tune in next time.
Build strong bones, yes.
Build strong bones.